Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. You know, Microsoft made some noise this week. No surprise there. We're going to get another update from SC24. You're watching Techstrong, gang. Hey, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel with my Santana hat here, but I'm in studio. I usually only wear this on the road. But happy Friday to you. We've got a Techstrong gang to remember today. We've got some great stuff to talk about. It's gonna be a little more free flowing than some of our usual ones because we don't have Mike Vizard on with us, who usually scripts these out for us. So hopefully John, Camberly, and I won't go too far afield, but it should be fun. Let me introduce you. I already mentioned their names, but want to thank some of our gang members here today with us. First of all, joining us from out in very, very wet Silicon Valley, where they have, what's it called? Some kind of bomb.
An atmospheric river, a bomb cyclone. You know what I call it?
A bomb cyclone. Yeah, that sounds worse than an atmospheric river.
It's a moderate
atmospheric
storm.
river sounds like a Grace Slick album in the early 70s or something. But John Swartz is here with us. Hey, John, welcome and thanks for being here.
Hey, I was going to share something really quickly since we're going to be free-flowing a little bit today. I wanted to thank you, Mike, and Amanda, who I'll work with, because I just signed a book deal to write a book about AI agents, the workplace, and their impacts. And the reason why I'm doing the book is because the publisher reached out to me and said, we've been reading these stories on Techstrong AI. We really like them, and we think this would make a great book, especially the stuff about AI and robotics. So I want to thank you all because you made it possible.
That is terrific. Congratulations.
That's a good, you know what? So as someone and Camberly, you know this, you're a founder too. When you start a business for a lot of reasons. We all want to make money, right? But you also want to kind of do good in the world. Somehow, every founder that's been successful in my career that I've met, and I've met hundreds, if not thousands of them, think in some small way what they do changes the world somehow, makes someone's life better. So the fact that you're going to write a book based upon what we are doing here, that's like, that's pay it forward. It makes my heart feel.
Yeah, this show and website have impacts. I mean, they are read by a lot of people. And I heard from an acquisitions editor at the publishing house who said, we really like this stuff and we want to see more of it. And we think there's a book in it. And if I were at my previous employer, none of this would have happened. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, John. And we're thrilled to hear that. And I know you'll write a great book.
The pressure's on.
No pressure. No, look, if it doesn't work out, we'll publish it in serial form on Techstrong AI if they don't like it. But whatever, we'll do what we can. Next with us today, she's joining us from semi-cold Colorado. It's not terrible for the Boulder area. It's only about 34 degrees. Camberly Bates. Hey, Futurum analyst Camberly Bates. Hey, Camberly, how are you?
I'm doing great this morning. A little rough from supercomputing, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear all about it. All right, let's jump into things. John, you were going to kick us off, I think, with that first.
Sure. Let's talk about Microsoft security because we don't talk about it enough. Maybe there's a reason why. So at the Ignite show this week, Microsoft announced a raft of zero trust tools and platforms, and they put up a $4 million bug bounty in a series of actions that seem to be as much about shoring up their reputation in cybersecurity as fortifying defenses. They seem determined, Microsoft, to make sure cybersecurity is no longer an afterthought. And the context is this. Microsoft's been under intense pressure over its handling of the CrowdStrike incident that resulted in billions of dollars in damage and exposed fundamental architectural flaws in the Windows platform. And Satya Nadella himself has claimed that security is now the company's top priority. And they have the equivalent of 34,000 full-time employees revamping their practices. So they made a tremendous amount of announcements, some of which I think were probably overdue. I was at a Tech Field Day event last night. There was a happy hour, and I talked to several of the people there and asked them for their reaction to the Microsoft news, and they said it was long overdue, and perhaps it will lead to something more positive, although it probably will take a significant amount of time. And so, in a sense, this is kind of a bookend to what happened with CrowdStrike, where, as you recall, at the time, Microsoft was conspicuously silent while CrowdStrike was taking all sorts of heat from everyone, it seemed. So it kind of brings me to this idea, Alan, I mean, you know security well. So Microsoft had this reputation of kind of, and I have from personal experience, I've heard this, from just kind of treating this as almost as an afterthought. Is that too harsh an assessment, or is that accurate?
Well, look, this is a deja vu, right? This is a deja vu. Back in, I guess it was around 2005. So remember, Microsoft was late to recognize the coming of the internet, right? And then, boom, it burst on the scene, and they finally built the TCP stack into Windows natively. I think in Windows 99 or something like that, and but their security was horrendous. It was very much like, it was worse than what you're saying. It was an afterthought. And of course, Bill Gates wrote that famous memo, the trustworthy computing memo, and that's why I say it's deja vu, that security was going to be job one for every single employee at Microsoft. And that they started a whole division of what we call trustworthy computing. And that Microsoft was going to be very serious about security. Shortly thereafter, we started seeing Patch Tuesdays, if you remember Patch Tuesdays, and all of these things. And Microsoft, and they went out and spent a fortune of money and hired some of the very best security people in the world. Many friends of mine went to work at Microsoft. They were serious. And that lasted through Bill Gates into the Steve Ballmer row. But they slid back. They slid back into their old habits. And quite frankly, CrowdStrike's just the last black eye they took. SolarWinds, a year or two ago, actually right around COVID, they took a good shot. The president of Microsoft went up and gave the mea culpa to Congress. There's been Microsoft Exchange issues. Look, no one's perfect, and we all have security things, but Microsoft, they needed this new trustworthy computing initiative, because that's what it sounds like to me. So they're talking about really implementing zero trust, which they should have done a long time ago.
Hey, can I mention something really quickly? You mentioned 2005. I have a personal story. So when the last time I wrote a book, which was a long time ago, it was about 16 years ago, we were doing research. And in the course of the research, I had an interview with Bill Gates. This is around early 2007, right after the launch of Vista. And there were questions about security back then. And I remember Gates and Craig Mundy, he was then the chief research and strategy officer for Microsoft, were in this interview. And I remember when I started asking Gates a general question about security, Mundy eagerly tried to answer. And Gates, and I'll show you what he did. He literally put his hand in front of Mundy's face and told him to be quiet, and then said something really that I always remember. Gates said, people talk about things like spam. We could get rid of this overnight. And that, to me, in a sense, kind of encapsulated the dismissive attitude they had about security at the time. So you're right. This is like a pattern. It's been going on for
decades. Took their eye off the ball. But let's get to what they actually said they're going to do. They're going to really go double down on zero trust. Welcome to the party. Better late than never. They are changing. So the way Windows was architected, in order to make certain changes for security things, you had to really get into the kernel, if you will, to make those changes. And they used to use that as a shield why they wouldn't let security companies into the kernel, because something like this could happen. And the courts said, no, you have to let other security companies, not just Microsoft, make changes at the kernel level to enhance security. So Microsoft said, oh, okay, we will. Probably I don't know if they recognized it or not, but it was a reasonable assumption that when I start working in the kernel, if something goes wrong and that kernel goes bad, you're going to have this CrowdStrike type of blue screen of death. And so it was a bad architectural decision. So now they're lifting these security things sort of out of the kernel so that these security companies like CrowdStrike can make the necessary changes they will, without it affecting right at the kernel level. And then I also understand that they've architected that even if you have like a kernel panic, blue screen of death situation, you're not, to make it easier to recover from that than the arcane ridiculousness of what it took to recover from this CrowdStrike blue screen of death thing. More power to them. More power to them. But let's see how long it lasts. You know, they have a real short attention span in terms of rehabilitating their security posture.
Yeah, there was one thing that kind of jumped out. I remember somebody mentioned the biggest change, and you reference to the kernel. Biggest change of all would let developers build security products that operate in a user mode instead of requiring the kernel mode. But wouldn't something like that take a while to implement? I mean, leveraging those changes.
They probably had this sitting in the wings for years, but
okay.
You know, they don't like to give third-party access to a lot of the inner workings of Windows. It takes, you know, we could talk about, they're not alone, right? Google and others as well on their own platform.
Okay, so this is curious, and I don't know. Thank you very much for educating me on this. This is fascinating. When I was with Veeam a couple weeks ago at their conference, one of the things they're working on is moving their platform to Linux. They're going to offer both, but it seems that, you know, they're in the data protection business, of course, which they're, you know, companies, the data security side of the house. And you start to see companies now saying, build on Linux. I'm not going to build on that. And maybe that, much like what we're seeing, you know, with Broadcom's actions, just saying when people start, you know, walking with their feet out the door, that kind of, they say, well, okay, so we need to wake up. And it's not for the goodness of everybody that they're doing this. There is a revenue issue that they're facing that they're getting the heat on. So I would suspect on this situation.
Absolutely. Look, people have been migrating to Linux for security issues
for a long time.
Yeah. And before Linux, you know, it was Unix. I always loved OS too, but what can I tell you? Anyway, I thought it was much more, hands down, much more secure than Windows ever was. But
that was also a major selling point for the Macintosh, right? Or Apple products. They made hay for years about this.
But let's be fair.
Advantages.
You know, when your operating system controls 95% of the market, like they did in the 90s, when, you know, Mac was barely alive, you had that big stick where you want to go to Linux, go ahead. You're walking away from 95% of the desktops in the world. Now, Windows is still, I think, about 80%.
Well, and the other piece to that is if you're TAM as a bad guy, the target TAM.
Yeah, where do you go?
Needs to be Microsoft if you're going to attack something.
Right. Though Mac has garnered a big enough share of market where they do get targeted. You see targeted attacks on Mac OS. And quite frankly, though Linux is, I hate to say the word more secure, but Linux has had less incidents than, let's say, Microsoft or Mac for that matter. But look, we've had problems with bad packages in Linux distros.
Well, and that gets back to saying, is that because the TAM is not that big? So if you're the bad guy, you're going to say, what can I attack? And
what's my lowest hanging fruit for the biggest bang for the buck?
Well, the biggest those hanging fruit for the biggest buck. Yes, that's true. So, but that is how I've always seen why Microsoft is the most attacked.
But and I think that's what Microsoft would like you to all tout that
That was
line.
part of their message. That was part of their messaging
Absolutely,
for years.
and
So
I
when
get it.
Apple would say, "Oh, we're much more secure." Microsoft said, "Of course, the attackers are going to come here. This is where the money is. Why they're going to the bank
Apple's
where
thing was we're secure by design, right? The other thing I just wanted to mention, and we can move on, is they also announced the biggest bug bounty program ever. I believe like $4 million for bugs, which, for our researchers out there, that's like, Bitcoin mining, right? That's big money. They're off and running, looking for bugs, and bug bounty programs work. I know I have a lot of friends from that side of the house. My friend Katie Mosouris, who actually used to work at Microsoft and started the original bug bounty programs there. Katie,
And even the bug, I'm not sure if you've experienced this at Techstrong, but with the Evaluator Group, twice over the 10 years, I had somebody, initiate a conversation with me to say,
we found a bug.
We found some things in your website, yada, yada, here. And if you would
Surprised you only got it twice, Kimberly. I get it once a month. I mean, but the world has changed.
Well, did you pay that? Did you thank them and pay them some money?
Yes.
Good.
I mean, it's not a lot of money. They're not $4 million bugs. I send them $100, $200, but the world's changed a little bit in that when you look at Techstrong, we don't really have any custom apps. We're running all off-the-shelf SaaS stuff.
Yeah.
So oftentimes when they find a bug, it's usually a configuration issue, or it goes back to the underlying WordPress program or database or something, and then I got to forward it, to WordPress or to our WordPress host. So, but if it's a misconfiguration, we've paid several times because it's well worth the money, in my mind. Anyway, let's take a break on our Microsoft story. We're going to come back, and John, you want to talk about deep fakes?
Sure, let's talk about it.
All right. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
Welcome back to Techstrong, gang. Social platform X last week sued to block a California law that targets AI-generated political deepfakes. Months after Elon Musk, its owner and world's richest person and Donald Trump's best friend, claimed the law would make parody illegal, quote unquote. So the lawsuit basically claims that this law in California, which goes into effect next year, violates the First Amendment and would result in the censorship of wide swaths of valuable political speech. The platform X said it has policies in place to moderate, quote, synthetic or manipulated media that might deceive or confuse and lead to harm. However, X includes exceptions for memes or satire, illustrations and cartoons, commentary, and counter speech. Now, I will open this up to the gang. What this is interesting to me about is that X's bid is to block the law could be like a litmus test amid a wave of legislation to tamp down on AI-powered election contests, especially deep fakes. More than half the 50 states have passed or are mulling such bills, according to an Axios report. It kind of brings up this whole notion of what is parody and the definition of free speech. And I think it kind of goes down this road that we've been hearing a lot involving social media. And X is trying to put their thumb down on the scale to accelerate maybe attacking laws in different states since there won't be any national law. And I just kind of want to open up to you and ask you what you think about this, especially it coming from Musk and X.
Kimberly?
I wouldn't necessarily, I'm not going to focus on Musk and Musk because I believe that part of what X ended up doing opened up a lot of conversation. And we've seen some tapping down even through the last 4 or 5 months coming up into our election of some of the other platforms, which, given what we have in terms of our information that we come into us, that free speech needs to roll, and it shouldn't be tapped down. I understand what he's saying in the parody. I mean, one of the things we've heard over the last year or 2 years from comedians. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld, a whole bunch of others have come out and said, you can't crack jokes anymore. Because if you do, you insult somebody. You can't do comedy anymore. You can't do sarcasm. And that's, part of life is laughing at yourself. I used to make blonde jokes all the time until somebody said, why do you do that to yourself? And I quit doing the blonde jokes. And but I understand part of it, we have to laugh at ourselves. If we don't, it's kind of like, God, this is like a boring life. That is part of it. And parody, the memes that show up, when we have something that happens and we see funny memes and that kind of thing, it gives me giggle. And it gives me giggle on both sides. And just to be very clear, I do listen to both sides. I have podcasts from both sides that and every once in a while I'll be listening to one. I'm like, oh, I can't stand that. And it's like, nope, don't turn it off. Listen to it. Because if it bothers you, look in the mirror. And that is, because when my principle of myself is that if I'm really bothered by something that somebody says, I need to look in my mirror and understand what it is about me that's causing me to get pissed off at that person, because it's usually something internally.
So let me put on my legal hat.
I got the warm and fuzzies today, I guess, is what I have.
Good for you.
Yeah, we do.
No, but here's the deal. First of all, I think, Kimberly, you're right. You need to take Musk out of it. Mm-hmm. Because at this point, anything Musk says has to be looked at through a conflict of interest lens because of his involvement.
Yes.
Right? So you got to take him out of it. But and let's be adults and take him out of it. It's hard for me to be an adult, but let's be adults and take him out of it. Parody is a long-held legal exception to libel, slander. Well, it's not a blanket exception. You can still libel and slander someone by using parody, but it's generally a long-held carve-out. Right? That parody is absolutely part of our free speech heritage here in the United States of America.
Well, Shakespeare, come on.
Well, but in England,
his comedy plays are all parodies.
Right, but in England, quite frankly, the king could have come in at any time and off with his head. Mm-hmm. Right? It wasn't protected in the common law. It is protected in our Constitution. Mm-hmm. But here's what we're doing. Here's what's going on here. These people are pulling an Animal House Hoover thing. They're they're being brought up on double secret probation charges, and they're wrapping themselves in the American flag of parody. Let's be clear. This bill, or it's now a law because I guess it was signed.
Well, it's going to go on. It's supposed to go into effect in January.
Well, that means it's signed.
Yeah, it's signed by Newsom. He signed it a couple of weeks ago.
Well, that's how laws in California get passed. They go through the legislature, the governor signs them, they're now a law. Right. This law is not aimed at cutting down parody. This law is aimed at mainly political, but it could be other things besides political, deep fakes where misinformation, deception, like they're doing stupid, bad things they shouldn't do. The problem runs into, and this is always the case when you talk, legal kind of principles and balancing, is how do you distinguish between parody versus, Kimberly, you get a phone call and it sounds like some older man saying, hello, I'm Joe Biden, and I think we should give Ukraine atomic bombs to blow Moscow out of the planet. And you say, oh my God, fuck it, Joe Biden is crazy. I'm making this up, obviously. Now, and by the way, maybe it's not even a audio call. Maybe it's a video of Joe Biden saying that. And then all of a sudden, the whole world's saying Joe Biden is calling for Ukraine to nuke Russia. And then it's a deep fake planted by Russia themselves or China or someone. And we're going to try to sue them or to stop that, put a prohibition against this. It's a deep fake misinformation propaganda. And Russia says, oh no, don't you have a sense of humor? It was just a parody. That's the issue, right? Anytime you look at these laws, you got to look at extreme examples and then you'll see whether they fly or not. How do you determine parody is the question.
That's always to me the sticking point is how do you define it?
Well,
it always
that's
comes down to
absence
that.
of malice, right? You got to look at that kind of thing, and it is hard. It's hard because parody is absolutely allowed. Freedom of speech, absolutely allowed. But at what point do you have the right to take someone's likeness and spread propaganda, misinformation, shout fire in a crowded theater?
Well, this is going to be interesting because this will probably make it to the Supremes and will go along the lines of when we talked about pornography. And the classic quote is, I'll know it when I see it.
And that might be the quote that winds up ruling the day here is, I'll know it when we see it. I hate that, though, because that's too wishy-washy for me.
So do I. But then the other flip side of this, I'm not sure if you saw what happened with Google. Google it will no longer take any political ads in Europe. They have said no more because of the laws that they have passed. We can't abide. We can't. They're too flaky or it's too mushy. What does it mean? What is it? So they've just completely pulled out of the political ad business.
You know what? At some level, believe it or not, I'd like to see all of social media pull out of the political ad business.
They are starting.
I think we'd be better off. I think we'd be better off as a society. There are days where I think social media is the worst thing that's happened to us in the last 25 years.
Well, and it's not just the ads. It's because you have all the influencers are making their statements or whatever, and then the broadcasting of it. So it's not, I can understand when you think about what has gotten pulled out, it's just the ads, not the commentary, not the...
Well, no, I will tell you on Facebook, I mean, right before the election, if you put posts up about politics stuff, they were clamping it down, regardless of whether it was red, blue, white, green. They just didn't want politics.
Facebook has made a concentrated effort to do that, especially after what happened in 2016 and their implications, right? So they have made an effort, as Google has, as you said, Kimberly, in a sense, going to censor it, not censoring themselves, but trying to show some sort of discretion. But
you just say we don't want politics on this platform. Right. And is that their right because it's a privately owned platform to do that? Or do they have an obligation to the public to give people freedom of speech? That's the nitty gritty of this. Mm-hmm. If it's my, hey, I don't go ring someone else's doorbell on Sunday morning, right? I don't want you on my porch Sunday morning preaching. And
it's going to be interesting.
Sign on your door like my husband did. He put a sign on the doors. I have voted and submitted my vote. Please.
So go away. Go away.
Go away.
But go play in front of your own house. But I mean, but when you're private home, you could do that. But what obligations does X or Facebook or Google or Apple or any of these folks have to just, because the problem is once you open the door a creak, boom, the whole door goes flying open. You got to let everything in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And maybe the answer is just keep the door closed.
The wild card in this, though, too, is also what happens if the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, becomes the chair, because he's making noises about lifting Section 230, which protects social platforms from third-party content.
So again, if I'm Mark Zuckerberg or any of these folks, and now all of a sudden I'm faced with liability over what someone else puts on my platform, screw that. I'm not letting anyone put anyone on my platform, put anything on my platform.
You'll eradicate it almost overnight.
And how can you can't at the same time hold my feet to the fire from a liability perspective and not give me the ability to just say, I don't want this on my house. I don't want this in front of my house.
So I guess we won't have parodies on Techstrong.
We always have parodies on Techstrong. We're judgment proof. Oh, no, maybe not with the future. I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. Let's not go down that road. But We used to, we occasionally still run them on DevOps.com. Our friend Bob Resselman, used to do cartoons 2-3 days a week. And we had some that were edgy, really edgy, that like, I was, it was a little, we had one time he put, it was a man and woman in bed and just a cartoon drawing of it. And the man is saying, not tonight, I need a rest. And the woman says, I thought you were Mr. Continuous Delivery. and I laughed too when I first saw it. Then I said, oh boy, I don't know how this is going to fly.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So you got to be, but that clearly, parody, take it from where it's at.
Yeah.
There's a thorny issue that has much bigger repercussions than I think just the deep fake stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. We're going to break here at Techstrong Gang. Let's come back and talk about SC24. We had Guy Courier give us a little report yesterday, but Kimberly, we want to hear what you saw.
Right.
You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hi, guys. I got back last night or yesterday from Supercomputing 24, which was in Atlanta. SC24, I think, is how they branded themselves now. Incredible show. 17,000 people was the number that they said were in attendance. Huge show floor. And let me give you a perspective because I've been going to the show for a long time. And my recollection of when I started going to it, it was about 5,000 people. It was the domain of all the research labs, including the labs that come out of your university. So all the major universities that have research labs, that have supercomputers that are coming from around the world, whether it's Zurich or Texas or Stanford or UCSD, et cetera, that was there, or Harvard even. They were there along with Lawrence Livermore, JPL, those kind of folks that were there. And it was all PhDs. And I used to call them the propeller heads. I'm sorry if I insult you. But it was a lot of
You know what? Those people were not insulted being propeller heads, Kimberly. They wore that with pride.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then a lot of PhD graduate students were there. What I would call as the slave people that the professors used in order to maintain their systems on the supercomputers, and why they would use open source so much for it. Anyway, that's changed. And that has changed because the world of Gen AI has entered the enterprise space. It's not like HPC has been in enterprise, oil and gas, pharma, very specific areas where they're doing deep research. But now it's Gen AI, which is a different architecture than HPC. And so it's a totally bigger show. It's not 5,000 people now, it's 17,000 people, which was bigger than KubeCon, right?
Twice the size almost.
Yes. It was, I think there were 45 rows of exhibitors. I logged 7 miles a day, walking back and forth to the show, talking to people. Incredible. And I think that it wasn't just, usually what we saw is a lot of booths with the major universities there, because what they were doing is farming. They were doing business development, getting people to use their computers and their scientists and their PhDs to do research. What we saw this time is a huge amount of vendors and a couple big themes that were there. Number one, liquid cooling is huge. Huge amount of announcements on it. Including, and we can talk about this later, Valvoline was there. The oil people?
Yes.
Right? You had to go, what are you doing there? Okay. That was one. Number two, yes, we're all of a sudden seeing new data systems, new data infrastructure systems, which has always been the domain of the parallel file systems from IBM, Panasys, BGFS, et cetera. We're now seeing new file systems coming in to address the needs, the unique needs of this market space. That's the second piece of it. And then, of course, coming into this, we had a huge amount of announcements from Dell, Lenovo, IBM, HPE, Penguin, you name it. The server business is on fire, bringing out everything from the GPU to the CPU to all those different systems and where they're going with it. So that's gives you a little flavor for what was going on down there. Very, very lively, very active floor.
Interesting. As you said, probably almost twice as many people than KubeCon. Yet KubeCon, I bet you had 90 rows of vendors, because they have a lot of 10 by 10s. They're one half of the KubeCon floor was, the big 40 by 40, 20 by 40 kind of things. But then they had, it seemed like it went on as far as the eye can see, rows and rows of 10 by 10s, all of these little stands of companies, mostly startups, because CNCF, the people behind KubeCon, there's over 180 projects in CNCF right now. So if just every project had a booth, that was 180 booths.
And what you're looking at here, I called it the petting zoo for technologists.
Uh-huh.
There was more. Hardware is a little bit harder to get out the door,
right?
Literally, and so you're talking, and there were quantum computers there.
Were there?
Yeah, the first time I saw a quantum computer was IBM, and that had to be
me too. It looked like a cappuccino machine to me, but
the first quantum computer was as big as a room. It was massive. The ones that we saw here were probably I don't know, not quite as about half the size of me. Significantly smaller. And saw I saw two of them on the floor. There might have been more. One was IBM and the other one was another company. I can't remember who it is, but the quantum computers were there. But that wasn't the story. There was a quantum section there, but quantum is a ways away from coming on board. What we're there, what's really talked about is the GPUs and all the stuff that's going to drive the GPUs, the Gen AI, the software behind it. Not too much of the software, because there wasn't a lot of ML ops kind of pieces there in those areas. But how do you build these systems and deploy them? So we'll call out also to HPE. They took the number one spot on the HPC compute, which was a system called El Capitan.
Yes.
That was done with AMD to great fanfare. So congratulations to them for their taking the top dog.
So the last 8 top supercomputers were HPE computers, is what we had heard about that. John, it looks like you wanted something.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, Kimberly. Guy, when we were talking to him yesterday, mentioned this huge amount of interest or the larger crowds. He said basically 3 times what you remember a couple of years ago, more vendors. For instance, there are probably significantly more brand name vendors. In a sense, remember, Alan, we were talking about this earlier, this kind of analogy with Black Hats, in a sense, how it blossomed in terms of attendance and in terms of people attending. And again, Gen AI has just kind of spiked what was already an interest, but it's also made it much more visible. It was kind of interesting for you to mention all the vendors that were there. Are they normally there every year, or were there new additions from last year?
Lenovo, HPE, all those guys are always there. Mm-hmm. But and you had all the parallel file system people there. Used to have some of the tape vendors there, because tape was where we put all that old stuff. But now it's having to be more live, the live data. I think what was increased there is some new and different data store, data infrastructure technology that's there. The infrastructure systems that are providing liquid cool, because that has exploded. I believe Lenovo mentioned on their latest earnings that 25% of the stuff they shipped was liquid cooling this last time around. Huge uptick on that piece of it. So they were all over the place. What's not there? You didn't see security there at all. None of the security data protection is there, which is understandable, because it's still not part of that that community. It will be eventually, but not.
I was what it says, like eventually will be in a couple of
when,
years.
when their customers demand it, it will, and not a day before.
Yeah.
That's security.
Yeah.
But I think there's a couple of mega trends at play here. First of all, I think, as we mentioned, AI has made hardware cool again, right? Certainly, everyone now gives a hoot about, how many teraflops and MIPS and all of these things that these processors can do. Number two, well, Kimberly, when I first came out to Boulder in 2001, there was that whole storage area up near Interlochen, right? Storage Tech, and then going into Interlochen, all the storage, McData and all those folks. And then by about 2005 or 6, maybe 7 at most, they all disappeared, right? Storage became anonymous, it seemed like. Well, storage isn't anonymous anymore. People are happy and proud to stand up and say, I've got 120 terabyte SSD card, right? Which kind of boggles my mind. So storage, hardware is cool. Storage is back out from the shadows. And then we actually have some really big problems in this world that make for great use cases for high-powered computing.
Yeah.
Right?
The other things that you saw, which were still development optics, being used for, some of the networking pieces of it were big, all the networking piece of it. And even like IR Labs was just talking about using the optical transfer, to transfer between a processor and the memory, and how that would work and what the design looks like and how, that's years, but there's multiple of those guys that are on there because just having to speed, that little space right there, how much faster can we make that thing move? And of course we have all the network people there. Although I didn't spend any time with them, but they were all over the place as well.
10 gigabit, 100 gigabit are all becoming real. I mean, it's funny because what you mentioned about the speed between memory to CPU, a lot of people Intel tried to short circuit that. They've all tried to short circuit it by putting memory on the chip, right? And then the computer on the chip is the memory moved to there to take away that millisecond latency that can happen. But now we think we could widen that bus, and we don't maybe have to put all the memory on. We can't put all the memory on the chip because today's uses have so much more memory consumption that, how big can the chip be? Let me ask you, was like the Taiwan chip manufacturers and stuff there?
I am sure they were. I don't recall because I wasn't looking for them.
Yeah, only because they're making noise now.
There was a lot of China there. There's a lot of Asia there. There's a lot of Europe there. There's a lot of EMEA, particularly from Israel, that was present. So yes, I'm sure that they were there, but I can't cite off the top of my head that was once they were.
I think the Taiwanese are, especially with the new administration coming in here, are being very cautious about what they're going to let out of Taiwan, because that kind of is their ace in the hole, right? That you can't let China invade Taiwan because then you'll lose access to those Taiwanese manufacturers and manufacturing. Anyway, it's great that, Guy mentioned yesterday, there is sort of a European version of SC24. It's not called SC.
It's called ISC, and it's held in Germany in June.
Excellent. All right, guys, I think we're about out of time for today's Techstrong Gang. Kimberly, thank you for coming on. I know you literally just got in from SC24, so many, many thanks. John, always a pleasure, and congratulations on the book deal.
Thank you.
Author. And we'll be back on Monday with another fresh Techstrong Gang episode with whatever, who knows what'll happen between now and then we could talk about. But we'll talk
Maybe
about it.
we might talk about Google some more.
Yeah. Well, this Google thing,
Oh, wow.
yes, we'll be talking about that. That's going to be fun. Until then, though, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong Gang. Have a great day, everyone.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm really happy to have our next guest join us today. His name is Deepan Desai. Deepan is the Chief Security Officer, CSO, at Zscaler, company I've been covering Zscaler. I think I've been covering Zscaler pretty much since Jay Chaudhry started Zscaler. We left his last company and started it, and that's probably been, I'm going to guess, 2007, 2006. Do you know?
2007,
Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
2007, 2008.
So it's been a while. Deepan, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on. As I mentioned, you're the Chief Security Officer, but you weren't born the Chief Security Officer at Zscaler, right? Let's hear a little bit about your path to becoming the CSO at Zscaler.
Yeah. So thank you for inviting me. I've been in the field of security for over 20 years now. I started as a researcher, focused on defensive side of the house. Then I had the experience of some of the offensive security as well, where I was red teaming, pen testing, exploit coverage, and then had my hands on product side as well, where building the new tech in order to defend against the evolving threat landscape. Throughout those 20 years, I have been always on the vendor side of the house, where the primary goal is, as it stands today, number one is to make sure protecting the company infrastructure, products, services that we offer. And being a CISO on the security vendor side, you also have the responsibility of protecting your customers. This is where I have the research and development function around cyber reporting into me as well, where we're looking at the threat landscape. What are the threat actors doing that is novel? How can we stay ahead of them? And sharing insights like the one that we'll be talking about today.
Absolutely. We mentioned Zscaler started 2007, 2008.
Yes.
Originally, in my mind, Zscaler was kind of one of the first true security companies that used the cloud. Not cloud security per se, but use the cloud to deliver better security, right?
Yep.
And
So-
also, go ahead. You can.
No,
This is your
I mean-
job. You got to explain it better than me. Go ahead.
No, it's I mean, you reminded me of something. So I joined Zscaler in 2014. It was a young company, 200 people, plus a little over 200. And you rightly said, like, we were the first company that started doing security in the cloud, true zero trust architecture, when the term zero trust didn't exist because of the way
Yeah, I
we
don't think it was out yet.
Yeah, exactly. And a common thing I would hear back then was, hey, why would we send our traffic to you for inspection, why wouldn't we do it on-prem, right? Because everyone had those on-prem appliances. Back then, the shift to public cloud was also not that aggressive. It was starting to happen. So truly, Jay had that vision, like when things will move out, you really need to have a central place where no matter where the users are, we're able to apply security consistently, whether they're at home, whether they're in office, whether they're traveling. And after COVID, it became an obvious thing. Like nobody is able to now go back to that hub and spoke architecture because you're not simply able to scale.
Absolutely. You know, I remember moderating a panel on, it was Americans Growth Capital, the AGC Partners Conference. It was always during RSA. And Jay was on my panel, and this was 2009, 2010. And you're 100% correct. He said, look, there's going to come a day where everything doesn't get backhoed back to the central office, where you're not going to have these big honking boxes there that are going to look at everything. That, and he didn't say people would be working from home as much as he thought you wouldn't have central offices. Instead of having a hub and spoke, you would just have an awful lot of spokes, and it didn't make sense to bring it all back. Right? You would move inspection closer to wherever the people were, whether it was in their house or at a branch office or at a customer or partner location. Right? There was going to be a cloud close by that we can do this in. And I remember the other folks on the panel looking at him like, yeah, sure. Right? You know, what is this guy? What is this guy on? But you know what? To Jay's credit, he called that shot. He saw it, and nothing's been the same, right? And it's a big reason why Zscaler is what Zscaler is today. Of course, it's so much more than that now, though, Deep. And you guys have threat intel, and I mean, there's a lot of different pieces to the Zscaler security solution set platform, whatever you want to call it. Part of it is your threat labs division, right? And you know, your own research. Why not, if you don't mind, we're going to jump into this threat report that you guys recently came out with. But before we do, if you wouldn't mind, give people a little insight into threat labs.
Yeah. So Threat Labs, I had the pleasure of building a team. It's a team of global security experts across 7 different countries now. And the way we build a team, it's actually 4 different groups, and they're aligned with the 4 important stages of the attack. So there's a group of researchers that are just focused on phishing, the initial access piece where the threat actor is trying to get in the environment. So these folks are heavily focused on countering that aspect, tracking the campaigns around phishing and exploit kits and things like that. The second group focuses heavily on vulnerabilities. So these are zero-day vulnerability exploits. The goal over there is to make sure not only do we protect our customers from exploitation attempts, but also partner with some of the vendors out there where we see some of the software bugs, defects being abused. The third is our malware group. That's where we have folks that are experts in tracking malware payloads, whether it's malware impacting PCs, Mac, or even mobile devices, which is one of the reports that we'll talk about today. And then the final group is focused on tracking threat actor infrastructure. So this is our command and control group. And the intent over there is we want to make sure we're getting intelligence and coverage added into Zscaler platform to break the attack at each of these stages. Because look, you do have opportunity to prevent some of these advanced attacks if you have the right intel, right coverage done at each of these stages.
Absolutely, and that's excellent. Before we get into the report again, if people want to get more information about Zscaler Threat Labs, just go to zscaler.com and look up for Threat Labs, or is there a specific place?
So you can go to research.zscaler.com, or you could go to threatlabs.com. Either of those will lead you guys to all the great work that the team publishes. You will be able to get access to some of the tooling that the team has built and open sourced as well.
And that's Threat Labs at THREATLABZ, like Zscaler.com. All right. I think we've done our foundational work here, Nadeep. And let's jump in. You mentioned this 2024 report, Mobile IoT OT Threat Report. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so this is our annual report where the focus is on threats targeting mobile devices, IoT, OT, infrastructure. So we'll look at things like mobile malware, even things like phishing campaigns, which are specifically tailored at mobile users with the intent of either compromising the identity or the device itself, leading to future attacks on the real infrastructure. Similarly, on the IoT side, the goal is to gain that entry point into the infrastructure. So you may have an IoT device that is exposed to the internet, or a relatively weaker technology that leads the attacker to those unpatched devices. We look at all the global telemetry from Zscaler. We also collect telemetry from the research and tracking work that Threat Labs team does, and give an annual snapshot of that. So we published that report in October for what we saw in the previous 1 year. And so the key findings, if I may go through them,
Sure.
number one was financially motivated attacks were on the rise. This is no surprise. The number one malware category that we saw was banking malware. There was 29% growth. There was also about 111% growth in spyware. And both of these are financially motivated, and their goal is either they will trick the user into providing the credentials using the malware that gets installed, or they will make the user click on certain things and make them sign up for some premium service that will result in the threat actor getting paid out. So that was number one. Number two is we saw campaigns where the goal was to bypass MFA. And this is where phishing attacks, where the pages were tailored for mobile screen factor, and they will be able to steal the MFA code. This is where using a stronger form of MFA becomes very, very critical. If you're using SMS-based MFA, if you're using even the Authenticator app-based MFA, there are kits out there that are able to bypass that and take over the identity. The third, and this is not a concerning one, I would say. I mean, yes, the number looks high, but over the year, the team discovered 200 plus fake applications on Google Play Store. These are all Android malware payloads that the threat actors were able to upload to Google Play Store. And when we discovered this, we work very closely with Google's Android security team, and they do a good job of responding quickly. They also have ability to remotely remove these, but these 200 applications jointly accounted for about 8 million installations. So these are 8 million devices or around about that.
Compromised.
Exactly. That had the malicious applications installed. So that was the third one. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So let me put a little context here. Look, when we talk about app stores, there's two app stores. There's the Google Play Store and the iOS. We have an OTT app. We had an OTT app. We pulled it. We're putting a new OTT app up as we speak. And so we've had to go through the process of putting an app into both Google Play Store and the iOS Apple Store, as well as Roku and Amazon. And they're, to be fair, literally millions of apps are on these Play Stores or on these repos, right? And a large percentage of the work in getting an app put on is automated. A human never looks at it. It's all automated.
Correct.
However, even more so than like code repositories, apps on a app store like this have a certain trust level built in it. People see it on there. They think that whether it's Apple and iOS or Google and Android, the powers that be have checked these apps and made sure that they're safe. 200 isn't a lot in the big picture, but it's still 8 million installs, 8 million people compromised. And for something that quite frankly shouldn't be, right? Why can't we do a better job of removing malicious apps or not even letting them in to begin with, right? And I'm not here to say Apple does a better job of it than Google. Oh, they in fact might. But what's the vulnerability there that allows this to happen?
Yeah, look, there are a lot of technical nuances on this one. Google has done a great job over the years of automating the vetting process. When someone uploads the app, it does go through an automated pipeline. But the threat actors also continue to evolve their tactics. So a simple example that I'll give without geeking out our audience is a payload, which is an app that is getting uploaded. When it gets uploaded, downloads the next stage payload, which is legitimate and does what the app is supposed to do. At the time of submission, the file that gets downloaded from the remote destination is all legitimate. Everything is good. It gets approved. It gets uploaded. And I'm again giving a very simplistic scenario over here. This is in a way handled now. But after the app gets uploaded, people download it. The next time the app visits a destination, they are able to switch the package that gets delivered. And they're able to do interesting things on the endpoint. Now, it's more complicated than how I described, but that's one way of thinking. Like, okay, when the vetting happens, everything is good. It's doing what it's supposed to do. At a certain stage, it starts doing, the anomalous stuff or the malicious activity on the user endpoint.
So let me play devil's advocate. And again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but we got a technical audience. You upload an app to my Play Store and I see your payload, the checksum on your payload is such and such. And now all of a sudden when you upload that app, your checksum is different. Immediately I red flag you and say, why is your checksum different?
So Alan, it's not the original payload. It's the next stage that it downloads from a remote destination. The payload remains the same that gets uploaded, that gets installed on devices. It's the next
where it's pointing to on the one. I got
exactly that they're able to switch it. Yeah. And it's like I said, it's not as simple as that. They will also check the destination and all of that, but they're using certain techniques to basically embed a package on these devices using that original app and install malicious.
So the moral and the lesson of this story is just because it's on these download sites doesn't necessarily mean it's safe.
Yes. Look, I would always still recommend download these apps from official Play Store. That's the safest. There's many other app stores out there where things are backdoored, malicious. They will claim to give you free version of things that are available on Play Store, but there will be a lot more to it than than they claim.
Nothing is free.
Yes. The one advice, and honestly, this is one of the way our team tracks as well. Like, you should, I mean, if you're trying to download something that's not that popular, you should at least take a look at some of the comments, because you will often find users who've been downloaded, installed, complaining about the app that's not doing what it's supposed to do. And at times that gives away. Now, even after the user realizes they downloaded something that's not doing what it's supposed to do, because the malware is already installed, they're not able to get rid of the actual component in many of the scenarios. But at least it gives a hint to the next user that falls for it.
Yep. Deepan, we're going down the rabbit hole here. We're at 20 minutes on our 15-minute interview. We need to wrap up a little bit. For people who want to get more information on, or maybe download the whole report and take a deeper dive, where can they get it?
Yeah, they can go to research.zscaler.com. The report is very, very detailed. You will get breakdown by industry verticals these guys are going after, what type of malware categories we're seeing. There are many more best practices recommendations, including tech stack that enterprises can deploy to protect their employees against some of the threats that we have outlined in the report, because it's just an entry point. The next goal for these attackers when they target your employee is to get into your infrastructure space.
Agreed. Deepan, thank you so much. I know we kept you overtime. I apologize. But thank you for coming on Techstrong TV. Maybe we'll talk again soon, whether it's at some conference or here on Techstrong TV. RSA will be in a few months. We're working on that right now, actually. So, but thanks for all you and the Zscaler threat research team does.
Thank you, Alan.
Appreciate
Really
it.
enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
All right. Deepan Desai, Chief Security Officer at Zscaler, talking about the Threat Labs 2024 Mobile IoT and OT Threat Report. Get it over at research.zscaler.com. Is that right? Get it from there. We're going to take a break on Techstrong TV. We'll be back in just a moment.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I'm really happy to have this next gentleman on as our next guest. His name is Loris Dejuani. Loris, say it for me because you say it better than me. Dejuani. Loris is the founder and CTO, Chief Technology Officer over at Sysdig. Loris, welcome back to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on. I hope all has been well in your world.
Everything is great, and thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. So, Loris, before we jump into our topic of discussion today, I always like to give our audience a flavor of who it is that they're listening to. So I mentioned you're the founder, you're the CTO at Sysdig. Sysdig is, of course, a major player in cloud-native security, cloud security. But you weren't always the founder and CTO at Sysdig. Give us a sense of, your journey.
Yes, Sysdig actually is my second company. My first company was called Case Technologies and was the commercial entity behind the Wireshark network analyzer. So in my career, I actually started working on Wireshark when I was in school, started a company behind the project. And so the first part of my career was a mix of open source and networking and security. And then the company was acquired in 2010. And in 2014, I started working on Sysdig, focusing essentially initially on the problem of visibility and security for cloud and cloud native infrastructures. So for the last 10 years of my career, I've been focusing, on everything that is related to cloud, in particular cloud native, trying to, build a platform that can be, like the great way to secure cloud native environments.
For those of us in security, more than 10 years, 15, 20, 25 years, more. Wireshark. So when I first got into security, there was a toolbox. A lot of them were open source tools, right? That every security, and it was mostly network security back then, right? That's where the action was.
Yeah.
And there was, you had Nmap, right? Yeah. Wireshark.
Yeah.
Little Snort.
That's
this.
Yeah.
And they were all great. And every security person I knew that those four, we knew all four. And they were like in your toolbox, like, the plumber wears the belt with the tool. Those were your tools. And they were ubiquitous.
Absolutely.
Security was simpler back. It was simpler to be a security person. I don't know if it was simpler or if we were as effective, but it was certainly a different time, right? And those were your tools, and every single security person, knew how to use them.
And it's been, on one hand, a great fun and honor, to be part of that generation and to influence essentially, like with Wireshark, with Snort, with Nmap, with all built by, people that I know well and I respect. We sort of define, like sort of the security and visibility stack. But it's also interesting how many of the things that, yes, the world is more complex nowadays and, more dynamic and faster. But at the same time, what we are building for this generation is very much inspired, like even just the SysDig, even just the way we collect data for cloud and cloud native security at SysDig, especially for the detection and response side, is very heavily influenced by the stack that we built for Wireshark, for TCP dump, for Snort in the past. And even Falco. Falco is an open source project. It's a CNCF graduated open source project that I worked on since the beginning. I am, the original creator of the tool. And Falco is heavily inspired by Snort, the way it works. But it's sort of Snort for cloud and cloud natives and containerized environments. So nothing is reinvented, or at least...
No, everything is built on top of it.
Exactly. Right? And you learn from the prior generation and you try to get inspired and you try to apply it, to the new challenges of the next generation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's what, someone would tell me nothing's new in the world, right? We just read, the combinations are different and the way we build things are, kind of, but you have everything you need and you go from there. But
at least there are people like me, with gray hair and gray.
Or at least you have hair. At least you have hair. Be lucky. Be proud. So, Lars, there are people out here who maybe don't know SysDig.
Yeah,
right? They may have heard of them, but they're not really. You mentioned Falco is a huge open source CNCF graduated project sponsored by SysDig, originally founded over at SysDig. But give people, if maybe who are not familiar with SysDig, a little background.
Yeah, SysDig is one of the leaders in cloud security. We offer a comprehensive platform that covers, like the life cycle of cloud and cloud native applications. Our platform includes vulnerability management functionality, detection and response functionality, compliance, risk and posture, and so on. So you can, deploy it to secure cloud applications, essentially from build from code to production run. What makes SysDig unique is our focus on speed of detection. So I sometimes, describe what we do as we're able to tell our users what other players in the space are able. We're able to tell today what our other players in the space are able to tell them tomorrow. And the other thing is we focus on a platform that is based on, as much as possible, on open source components and on pieces and components that are developed by a community and for a community.
Fair. Absolutely. And of course, sysdig.com is the main website.
Sysdig.com. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. With that out of the way, Loris, let's jump into what we want to discuss today. You mentioned 10 years, 10 plus years. You've been working on Sysdig, Cloud Native. Cloud Native's been around, right?
Yeah.
But here we are 10 years in and we're getting ready. KubeCon is in a couple of weeks, less than a month out, I think now. And here we are. Patchwork, powerhouse. Has it reached critical mass? Has it reached its potential? If not, will it ever? You know, did you think it would take this long? How much longer? Give me your views. Has it been a success?
Well, I must first of all admit that I probably have a little bit of a biased view here, because by definition, since the company that I founded and that I still work for operates in the cloud security space, and in particular, our solution was, very much born as a container security solution. So, the inception, the beginning of Sysdig was specifically for container security, and the company was essentially born together. I remember, a few months before we started our company, a little platform as a service provider based in San Francisco called .cloud was renamed into Docker.
The Docker.
So it was the very beginning, and then Kubernetes, released by Google, and the orchestrator wars. I don't know who remembers, like Mesos and Docker Swarm,
and Rancher, and everybody thought they were going to be an orchestrator.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely, I've seen this evolve and mature a lot, and I'm involved in like Kubernetes projects and cloud native projects essentially on a daily basis. I would say, first of all, I always believed, and I still believe, that cloud native, and in particular the Kubernetes stack, to me is the operating system of the cloud. And more, similarly to the way Linux is an operating system that runs on a single machine and orchestrates processes and applications on a single host, Kubernetes, sits on a cluster and orchestrates applications that run on this cluster, and in particular the different services that compose an application. So I think that for anything of a certain scale and of a certain complexity in the cloud, there's no escape to the fact that in the long term they will be run by Kubernetes. It's just the right stack for this kind of stuff. At the same time, this stack is relatively complex, and in my opinion shines particularly when you run applications of a certain scale in production. So for example, one thing that surprised me when I started being part of this ecosystem is that I was expecting originally the adoption to be a little bit like the adoption of the cloud, where small startups maybe and smaller entities took advantage of the cloud first, and the enterprise came only a few years later, right? AWS started in 2006, 2007. And, after like 5 or 6 years, we started seeing actually, real enterprises and corporations using it. While with containers, I think it's been the opposite, I've seen adoption that, or at least I'm witnessing even today, adoption typically comes from bigger companies, especially, in spaces like finance, like media, like internet companies and so on, companies that need, let's say, the scale, the automation, the functionality that comes from being container native. So I think that despite, this really being the stack for the cloud, it's especially useful and especially adopted by companies that actually have required the scale to actually make this useful.
Well, and that can handle the complexities of it because, look, I remember the first Docker Con I went to. We were thinking about launching what became Cloud Native now. And I was going to use Docker in the word because I thought Docker would be the be-all, end-all for Cloud Native. But we couldn't because we would have got sued, right, Docker? I'm glad we did it in retrospect, right? It was bad enough. But I came back and I told the team here, I said, there's this other stuff I saw, the orchestrator for the containers that Google it's not, it's in 0.8. I think at that point it was Kubernetes 0.8 or so. It wasn't, the 1.0 release. I said, everyone's talking about that, but I don't see how it's ever going to succeed. It's so hard. I don't know how people would do it. Well, that's why I'm still doing this. But, it is hard. But here's the, one of the things I've learned as I've grown is it's about using the right tool for the job, right? You use the wrong tool and the job gets a lot harder. If you have a greenfield situation, there is no doubt that doing it on a cloud native stack, on a cloud native infrastructure is the way to go, right? Because you've got a nice clean sheet of paper. You can do it really well. You can do your microservices and the whole thing. And you can design it securely from the outset too, using Sysdig and other tools. If you have a brownfield situation, though, so you have an application that you want to transform, migrate, it's still not easy. It's still way too hard, right? Taking a monolithic application and trying to convert it to microservices and, you could just take a whole monolithic application, wrap a container around it, put it up there and have, Kubernetes manage that container and tell yourself you're cloud native.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel of Techstrong, Cloud Native Now, PlatformEngineering.com, and DevOps.com here. We're live at KubeCon in Salt Lake City, where it's been snowing. I've got a chance to break out all that winter clothing that I've had packed away in my closet. But we're here and we're interviewing people and meeting people. It's a great KubeCon. I think they're expecting probably the largest KubeCon in North America to date. I want to introduce you to my friend Alex Yee. Alex is here. He is the CEO of a company called GMI
Cloud. Yeah.
And if you missed it, I actually did an interview with Alex about 2 weeks ago on regular Techstrong TV, but we took advantage of us both being in the same place this week to catch up again. So first of all, Alex, welcome. Is this the first time you've been to KubeCon? Or?
To KubeCon, also Utah, and this is the first snow of the year for me.
Is it? Good.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to embarrass anyone, but one of our camera people, this is the first time he's seen snow coming down too.
Oh, okay.
He was very excited for it. But I've actually been to Salt Lake City before, but it's a great KubeCon. You could tell how big the
Absolutely
showcase floor is, but there's also some great content. Alex, for people who maybe didn't see our first Techstrong TV interview and are not familiar with GMI Cloud, give us kind of the short version.
Yeah, so first of all, GMI stands for General Machine Intelligence. We're here to build the AGI future. So what does that mean, right? We want to build a cloud or a AI platform that allows anyone or any engineers or any founders to build an AI application instantly.
Right.
So think, I would say Wix or Squarespace for AI. We want to make it seamless, make it easy, abstract all the difficulties on deploying AI, including infrastructure to model selections, to data ingestion, migration, all of that under one view, one panel.
You know what? One of the things I got out of our last interview was, look, there's going to be plenty of infrastructure providers, hardware providers.
That's right.
Who are going to offer you sort of, let's call it GPU as a service. But that's not the GMI model.
No, yeah.
It's not pure GPU as a service. It's actually, there's pre-packaged AI applications in here that'll, or maybe not applications, let's call them AI building blocks that allow you to build your application really rapidly. It's almost, rapid application development for AI apps.
Correct.
On state-of-the-art GPUs as well. And that's, it's kind of a unique kind of offering right now in the market.
I would say so. So I think here's what I see. Like you're absolutely right. So the current state of the market is people are just selling boxes essentially.
Yeah.
Here's some GPUs. If they break, we'll try to solve it. And please don't come back to us if it breaks. That's kind of the mentality. And then if you're not ordering, for example, this is for hyperscalers, right? If you're not ordering in a large quantity of say 10, 20 million bucks per year of cloud spend, then we're not even giving you a account manager to support you, and not to mention adding the features that you want. Where we do differently is we want to offer a service. I think GPUs are cool, but people come to us buying GPUs not because they think GPUs are cool, just buy for fun,
right.
but maybe for fun, but to build a solution.
To experiment at this point, a lot of them.
To experiment, to build a solution. And we're here to help them to build that solution. So there's founders who are building biotech, founders who are consolidating all the weather patterns together and predict, I would say, agriculture yields, or predict, I would say, the next potential disasters for disaster recovery, all that stuff, right? And we want to enable them to build that. And we see that it's so difficult to build an AI application. And so we just want to enable that and make their life much easier. So instead of hiring 20, 30 people, including infrastructure, including ML engineers, including full stack engineers, you just hire data scientists. And then we handle all the difficulty, all the infrastructure.
So, I mean, obviously you think this, but this is the model for a new age going forward.
I think
right?
so.
Don't spend money trying to find difficult to find folks who play in that space, right?
Yeah.
Or as you mentioned, the full stack people, the infrastructure folks, all of them. Let's and I just want to make sure before we go further. GMI.cloud.
GMIcloud.ai.
That's right. Okay. I want to make sure people get that. All right, let's turn to KubeCon a little bit.
Yeah.
Look, cloud native has become sort of the compute stack of choice.
That's right.
Right? Especially greenfield. If you're building a new application, not a brownfield, I think something like 80% or
everyone's
more
building on
right, on Kubernetes,
yes.
containers, microservices. How is what you're doing at GMI work with that, play with that?
So we actually offer a lot more flexibility. So I gotta say two things. One, we can connect their on-prem if they want to choose on-prem, or our public cloud or hybrid. We can offer those solutions for them. And we have our Kubernetes, managed Kubernetes environment sitting on top. So we built a orchestration software that's built on OpenStack and Kubernetes that we can decouple from our GPU services. And so for companies that already bought the hardware, and bare metal, frankly, is a bit difficult to use. So we actually can license that entire stack to them so that they have call it AWS on the go and for their on-prem services. Yeah, so those are, I guess, one differences. But aside from using K8s, we actually can offer people manage, I would say, bare metal to VM, HPC Slurm, container, and Kubernetes. So we have that
really
options
the whole
for
spectrum.
Exactly. So I would say it's a grander and larger architecture that allows people to have really high flexibilities on the type of workloads they want. Because some people want root access, right? And then for their workloads, and they have their orchestration. Then we don't want to interfere with that.
So I mean, you as a service provider here, you want to give people ultimate flexibility to cover any option they may want. Looking in your crystal ball, though, do you see cloud native being the dominant compute stack here for AI apps going forward, or do you think it's going to be?
I think so. I mean, if you think about GCP or Azure or AWS, how they grow to the size. I mean, if you think about what these clouds are, they're essentially a wrapper on servers, right? And then if you call AWS, so they're just selling storage essentially. I think that's not fair to them, but that is the current state of the market, is the GPUs. Can you imagine, like right now the state is actually, you can go to brokers and say, hey, I need say 1 year of GPUs, and they'll just find you that I would say basically EC2 somewhere from a random vendor, right? It's unimaginable to I would say the traditional world, and so I think that will consolidate, move to I would say a cloud environment. But frankly, for the last year or so, it's just because the supply chain is so constrained.
Right.
And all you have to do is just like, hey, I got 1,000 boxes, so rent from me, right? But as that supply matches up to demand, people will require more, I would say, cloud native solutions or solutions that enable them to build better applications.
They're not going to
monitoring,
just want a
orchestration.
box.
Exactly.
Hardware,
No way.
metal.
That's not how it works.
You know, you said something in our last interview that I remember. You said, I want to sell the picks and shovels, right? And it's true. I think the people today who are saying, I've got GPU boxes, are saying, look at this gold dust.
Yeah.
Right. And eventually,
okay.
gold dust ain't going to do it. Go ahead.
Actually, I want to revise that. Okay. So
go ahead.
NVIDIA is the one that sells picks and shovels. I'm the one that buys a lot of picks and a lot of shovels.
So
and
NVIDIA manufactures the picks and shovels. You want to be Walmart.
I'm not Walmart, or I buy those axes and I wash it clean and lease it to people. And when they're done with that, I take it back and wash it again.
And give someone
And
else.
aside from just having picks and shovels to rent to people, I also have the gold panning thing,
Right.
and also
All
a
the
washer,
equipment they
all
need.
the equipment, whatever they need. Like the goal for them is like, I want to help you to find gold as soon as possible. So whatever machinery, we got it, right?
I got it. But it's not just buying a GPU.
No, so
That- or
everything, all
renting
the
a
stack from
GPU.
finding a gold, right?
Yeah, and I think that's an important, again, I'm going to emphasize that. It's not even just the cloud native stack.
Yeah.
It's the app building blocks on top of these
Super
things.
important. Yeah.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. We're here. It's early, right? We doing this early in KubeCon. They're still not even open here. But we're almost at the end of the year. What are you doing for a second act? What's new coming up in GMI?
Yeah,
If
so
you could talk about it.
Yeah, of course. So right now we're focusing on, I would say, the infrastructure. So we want to build a vertical solution, but you need to have a very strong foundation, right? Just building a tree, you need very strong roots that goes into. That's why we chose a much bigger architecture using OpenStack, so that we have a very strong foundation. But so that is, we call it the cluster engine, basically a very powerful orchestration software that manages and oversees and predict all the potential failure of the GPUs, right? The next step is, I would say, we call it the inference engine, right? So that will be rolling out end of this year, sometime Q1 next year. So which is, I would say, it's built on Kubernetes environment that allow us to increase the SLAs to over 99.99%, which does not exist in this environment because the GPUs fail so much.
Do
right?
they? I don't know if people realize that.
For the people who are training with their
They realize it. They live.
they know.
Right.
They will know. Like for example, like when Meta, well, this is public, so when Meta is training Llama 3, I think it failed 100+ times in first 30 or 45 minutes,
Really?
45 days. So on average, they break down every 3 hours.
Wow.
I think their SLA was like 50%. Can you imagine that?
50%.
50%.
So I was in the data center business at the turn of the century. That sounds old. But back then, we were promising 5 nines, right? That was the standard, 5 nines.
CPU is much
CPU
easier.
is much easier,
Yes.
obviously.
So GPUs is super hard to manage. And so one thing is having a very, very strong, I would say, SOP to manage the GPUs, make sure when things fail, we have a very robust team that can react in 15, 30 minutes to help customers. But more important is, I think, on the software, because we cannot prevent the GPUs from failing. It's just a mathematical non-zero chance.
It's part of it's right now anyway.
It's 200,000 points per server, right? So
rules.
Yeah, it's math, right? Math with big numbers. And so what we do differently is essentially we'll kick in all the I would say all the available GPUs in whenever one goes off. So to the customer, they don't care, right? They just say, hey, I got 100 teraflops, right? And then that's what we will promise them, and they can give us a constraint.
What you do on the back end,
exactly,
your business.
Exactly. So we're rolling that out, and no one's offering that at this moment.
And
I'm really
calling
excited.
that an inference
engine. Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah.
Not to put I don't want to put you on the spot, but when do you think we might see this inference engine?
So we're rolling out beta to I would say pilot customers before end of this year, and then GA between January and February-ish.
And how do you become a beta customer? GMICloud.ai.
Yeah, or reach out to us, and I'm happy to do a design partnership with you guys.
I love it.
Yeah.
Alex, I think you're going to love your first KubeCon. When you get back home, reach out to me. We'll do a Techstrong TV and we'll compare notes and see how it went for you.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Hey,
thank you.
Congratulations. Great to see you in person.
Good to see you as well.
Alex Yee, founder, CEO of GMI Cloud at gmicloud.ai. Here at KubeCon. We're going to take a break. We'll be back. We've got a lot of KubeCon coverage coming your way.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here at KubeCon, Salt Lake City. This might be, I think, our last interview here of day one. We saved some of the best for last. Really, it's been a great day. You know, I don't know how much you guys see besides just the speakers, but there's a lot. We're right in the middle of the floor, and there's just the whole world walks by here. But there's an energy, and that's something in KubeCon that you don't see in a lot of other shows. And that's
So true.
I forget from one KubeCon to the next how the energy of this community, how electric it is. Anyway, let me introduce you to our two speakers that we have here today. To my immediate left is a woman who is always nice enough to be on our DevOps Unbound series and some of our other Techstrong TV series. She's Adriana Villela. Adriana, well, if you've ever seen her in any of our series, was working at one company. She's recently joined a new company. She'll tell you about it in a second. She's also very involved in the Open Telemetry project, but also she presented here at KubeCon yesterday on Zero Day. And this gentleman right here is Adriana's partner in presenting, Marino Wijay.
Wijay. Yes, got it.
Marino Wijay. Marino, welcome, and it's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
So, Marino, I know a lot about Adriana. I kind of filled it in. We'll let her fill in, but I don't know as much about your background. So why don't you share if you can?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the tech space for probably about 20 years now, more than that actually. Spent a lot of time, working in the ops space, moving up in the ranks towards architecture, and spent a little bit of time in the developer relations space as well recently. But I've moved back into professional services, and it's been fun. So I currently work as a staff solutions architect at a company called Kong. You might know them. They do API management.
Oh, Kong very well.
Oh, yeah. And they're in the service mesh game as well, which is where I live. I live in the intersection of networking and service mesh and Kubernetes. So a little bit about me. I'm based out of Canada in Toronto as well, or actually not really Toronto. I'm really more like outside of it in Whitby, but close enough because everyone knows where Toronto is.
I hear you.
And, I've been there all my life, but one of the cool things that I've noticed about that space is it's got a very vibrant tech community.
Toronto always has.
It does. So, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marino. I appreciate it. No, we've covered Kong, both the open source aspects and commercial. Actually, I'm trying to think of his name. There was like a DevRel person at Kong. He lived in New Jersey. Tall, blonde, sort of like Ivan Drago.
Victor Gamov.
Victor, my friend. Yeah, it's Victor.
Yep.
So Victor, I think one season, him and his family moved down to Florida. And he used to come in our office like twice a week.
Oh, wow.
Record his podcast and everything in our studio.
His videos are awesome.
Yeah, well, we used to do his videos.
Wow,
and,
that's why.
Yeah, no, I mean, we helped him a lot with his videos. But yeah, Victor was great. And that really... we got to get an inside look at if you will, at Kong. So good stuff. Adriana, before we jump into what you guys presented on, I mentioned that you recently changed jobs. Why don't you give us a little insight there?
Yeah, so I was I'd been originally hired by Lightstep, which was acquired by ServiceNow. So and it was my first developer advocate gig, actually. And I just recently moved out of that role into my second developer advocacy role at Dynatrace.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We had Dynatrace here earlier today, and I just did a interview with Dynatrace. It was interesting. This guy was, I think, over in Europe, been with Dynatrace about 17 years.
Oh,
Worked
wow.
his way up.
Yeah.
Might have been chief product. Was he the product officer? High up in Dynatrace. But it was so interesting to get his perspective because in today's day and age, when do you get people who are there 16, 17 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it was a good interview. Anyway, congratulations on the new role.
Thank you.
They've got they made a good choice in
Thank
getting
you.
you there, so good for that. Wanted to talk a little, as I mentioned, you guys both presented together yesterday. What did you present on, and tell us about it?
Yeah, so we presented at Platform Engineering Day, and it was our first time presenting together, and my first time presenting at Platform Engineering Day. Was it your first time?
It absolutely was.
Yeah,
So it was
so-
exciting.
Yeah,
Very
it was
exciting.
awesome.
Now, this was Platform Engineering Day from CNCF,
Yeah,
That's right.
not with platformengineering.org.
that's right. This was that
Community.
co-located event.
This was a co-located,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't think of a more timely interview to have today
I
because
know, right?
we announced this morning, of course, the launch of platformengineering.com, our newest Techstrong site. And, you know, I like to say at Techstrong, we're about breaking down silos. See what I did there? And we, you know, we think with platformengineering.com, we're breaking down some silos because in our view of the world, and I'm interested in how you guys view this. Look, we built software, whether we like to admit it or not, in sort of a factory. It may not be a factory with big machines or robots. Well, maybe they're digital robots. But, you know, it's not a car factory per se, but nevertheless, there's an assembly line and a supply chain. And part of that are these frameworks and you know, disciplines that we use along the way. And I think it's time platform engineering is recognized as one of those key building blocks of the factory. The same way DevOps is, and Agile is, and Cloud Native Stack is, and DevSecOps, and SRE, and you know, all the way through observability. Very, right, dear to you.
Yep.
So, fantastic. Let's hear, what did you present on Platform Engineering Day? What did you present about?
So we talked about, oh my God, I'm brain farting.
Yeah, we actually talked a lot about our.
Okay, we've got Marina.
So we had our best practices that we wanted to lay on and define what policy as code is, because when you think about platform engineering, one of the biggest challenges is breaking down the silos, like you just suggested. But policy also enters the chat because there are so many different types of policies.
Yes.
And when you have different teams wanting to move into production, they can't be doing their own thing. You need an external team that kind of has this foresight, has this ability to view all these different activities, all these different application requirements, and bring them all together as one, but as code. Somehow as code that can be repeatable, reusable, that could be modified down the line and iterated upon to be better so that it can be optimized. And that's essentially what our talk was about. But there's a security element here. It's a big security element because there are different kinds of policies. Sometimes we overlook those policies and we might shortcut them because we want to get into production, because we have some metric or goal that we have to hit. But guess what happens if you don't hit those policies or wrap them around your workloads? Something breaks, something goes down, and then it becomes a bit of a operational nightmare down the line.
Yes,
And
it
I
does.
think the other thing that I want to add, like this talk was born out of like our personal frustrations because we've
Exactly.
been through this stuff. Like even like simple example, like you're onboarding onto a new company and you're having to request all of this access to systems like manually. Like what about having those policies in place, codified so that it's not having to be such a arduous process?
Yes. You know, I think I wrote an article today for Platform Engineering about platformengineering.com about why we launched this site. So I've gone through my own evolution. You know, when they first started with the whole platform engineering thing, it was DevOps is dead, platform. That was all nonsense. I think we recognize that. However, I think, you know, platform engineering is certainly real. Platform engineering is needed. I also think a lot about platform engineering isn't necessarily new.
Yep. So
These
true.
are things that we have been doing or we should have been doing all this time. We're just kind of grouping them together with maybe a new name.
Yeah.
But we're doing these things. And a lot of it is born out of frustration, born out of, we're tired of banging our head on the wall. The head's getting soft, right? And so there's got to be a better way. And I think that's kind of the promise of platform engineering. It's not necessarily, it is about breaking down silos. It is about trying new things. It's not It's not like AI where, man, we're just going to disrupt the whole, potentially disrupt the whole field. This is more about let's kind of codify what we're doing here and put some policies and process in place that makes sense, that makes us go, that allows developers and everyone else to go faster.
Yeah.
So what was the reaction? What kind of crowd did they have at Platform Engineering yesterday?
I feel like we had a good crowd.
A large
turnout.
crowd.
Yeah. It was like,
I heard it was a large crowd too.
huge room, and like it was pretty packed, I would say, right?
Yeah.
And you get multiple viewpoints and personalities that come in. We didn't have any time for questions, though,
No.
unfortunately, because we just went right to the end.
Yep. We
But
have to cover.
yeah, I mean, folks are always welcome to come up to us and chat with us after the fact. And I'm sure, like, once we get back, we're going to get a lot of questions about how we can help them and, help them navigate this whole policy as code when it comes to platform engineering.
Well, look,
Yeah.
I'd love to give you a platform to continue that conversation,
Oh yeah.
right? Maybe on platformengineering.com. We could either do it as a video, not here right now.
Yeah.
I got enough on my plate.
Yeah.
But back from the studio, we could set something up.
Yeah, that'd be
Or
awesome.
if you want to write something, I'm sure they're not getting CNCF owns that video. I don't even know if they do videos at all of the 0 day.
They
I still
do,
call them
like they
0
do
days.
for Observability Day.
Yes.
Say,
But I don't know if
did
they do it for everyone, to tell you the truth.
Oh,
Because it's
they
a lot.
recorded our video.
It looked
They
like-
did,
it
for
looked
sure.
like they were
Yeah.
recording.
You gotta remember, there's like 24 different
They
events
always
that
record
day.
all the
Yeah.
events. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe if that's available, we could, kick off with that. But I'd love to, talk about it. Open telemetry while we're here.
Sure.
What's going on here? They had their thing too, and
Yeah. I presented at that yesterday too.
so you're again, you're just lollywagging, not doing anything, Adriana, coasting, coasting.
Just coasting. And then Marino gave you gave a workshop yesterday morning too.
That's right. Yeah.
Where'd you give a workshop?
So Kong ran their own little workshop
Yes, I
event,
saw it.
and they focused on two key things: their AI gateway as well as their developer tool called Insomnia. So there's a lot of noise around AI, and every single AI is just an API. And when you think like that, now you have the right tooling that's already possibly in place if you're already using Kong to be able to get you to that level of, hey, how do we shift from one LLM to another LLM, do like the high availability magic, do the cost control. That's effectively what that workshop was about.
Excellent. Well, guys, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
I will add one thing because you mentioned silos, and
Yes.
the main thing, like I'd say one of the biggest takeaways from our talk yesterday would be like that when it comes to crafting policies, we often see this case where the people crafting the policies don't consult the ones who are
actually
affecting
living
the
with them.
policies,
Yeah.
right? And nothing's more frustrating than like, all of a sudden you come into work.
Democracy in action.
Right. And like, I think the most frustrating thing is coming into work and having, finding out that all of a sudden, as a developer, I can't install software on my work machine to do my job because some policy has been rolled out without me being consulted. And so having like really bridging those silos, like let's all be friends, y'all, because otherwise like we can't craft effective policies.
I agree with you. But that's classic stuff, right? The people here make rules for the people here, and then they don't understand why the people here think those rules aren't really such great rules. And, and that frankly is one of the great things about the whole Linux Foundation model is, on your TOCs and on your governing boards, yes, you have the big companies, the big guys, but you have individuals, and there's always a certain amount of board seats set aside, right, for an unaffiliated individual and stuff like that. And it's important. I think that's part of the reason for the success. You got 180 something projects right here in CNCF. It's part of the reason for that. All right. Hey, Marino, man, this is your first time on here.
Thank you so much
don't
for
be
having
a
me
stranger
here.
to Techstrong TV, all right?
Absolutely.
Adriana, always a pleasure.
Thank you
Good
so
luck
much.
on the new gig. I'm sure
Thank
you're going to
you.
rock it. And I'll see you on some Techstrong TV thing
Yeah.
sooner or later.
For sure.
All right. Hey, we are going to wrap up day one of KubeCon. We hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back tomorrow with another. We actually have a crazy slate of stuff tomorrow, so don't miss it. We'll start in the morning and go all day. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com, PlatformEngineering.com, Cloud Native Now, Techstrong TV, Digital CXO, Security Boulevard, Techstrong AI, Techstrong ITSM. Have a great day, everyone.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on bridging developers and DevOps, unifying teams with infrastructure from code. My name is Lauren, and I'm the VP of Product here at StackGen. Thank you so much for joining us. Over the next 30 minutes, my coworker Caesar and I are going to explore how infrastructure from code, or IFC, we might refer to it that way, can help bridge the gap between development operations, ultimately improving collaboration and deployment velocity.
Hey Lauren, I need some help. I have an app that I need to deploy. My boss really wants this today for a marketing push. We're doing a marketing promotion for kittens, and he wants it like right away. I have a deadline, so please help me deploy this because it needs to go in right away.
Oh, wow, yeah, okay. Cool. I totally hear that. It's like 5 p.m. though. And we're working through some production maintenance. We think we could send an email about it last week. It's going to be ongoing for a couple of hours. I don't know that we're going to get to this tonight. I'm sorry, man.
This is always a problem with you guys, ops folks. I'm tired of this, to be honest. I'm going to have to escalate because it's always the same thing. It's always the same thing with you.
Yeah. No, yeah. I really understand. But we're literally right in the middle of this update. It's definitely going to take at least an hour, and that's assuming that nothing goes wrong and unexpected stuff doesn't pop up. So the absolute earliest I can get your app out is going to be after 8 p.m.
You know what? Just let me have the access. I'll do it myself. How hard could it be?
Okay, yeah. Do you know how to write Terraform?
I can ChatGPT it. That's going to be easy.
Did that sound familiar to you? It probably did. It's something that we've both heard a lot and also experienced. As I said before, hello, I am Lauren, VP of Product at StackGen and not a DevOps professional.
I'm Caesar, VP of Engineering at StackGen.
And not an incalcitrant developer. All right. So in the scenario that Caesar and I just played out, you see the divide that can occur between devs and DevOps teams. Often our companies incentivize these teams totally differently, right? I was incentivized to keep our systems up to date, secure, and to communicate out my timelines, but stick to them once they're in motion. Whereas Caesar was incentivized to push out updates and new features as quickly as possible to demonstrate user value, right? But intermixed with our different motivations was also our interdependency. Caesar needs my knowledge to help deploy his app, and I maintain the infrastructure so his app can be out in the world.
And the thing is that developers want to go as fast as possible once the feature is released. If it's all good from a QA, security, and governance perspective, they want it available for the customers to use. And they want the process to release to be as frictionless as possible. We don't want to see our DevOps folks unless it's an emergency and we really, really need their help. Then we call them. Years ago, in a previous role as a security architect in my organization, we tried to implement Golden Path Terraform modules so that developers that fit into a cookie cutter infrastructure architecture could release as fast as possible. And that worked well, but for the development teams that didn't fit into those architectural patterns, it was a huge pain. We unnecessarily added additional overhead and hindered their innovation and ability to quickly adopt new technologies, which is not good.
No. And we need each other, right? But we have to find a path forward that meets both of our needs and the incentives that our company sets for us. So ideally, there would be an approach that leverages both of our strengths and makes up for the places where we don't have as much context.
So one of the ways we're trying to solve this divide is with something called infrastructure from code. So Lauren, what's infrastructure from code?
I am so glad that you asked, Caesar. Infrastructure from code uses Caesar's application as the starting point, figuring out what infrastructure is required to successfully run Caesar's app and generating the IAC to fit the needs of that app. And because it's coming from that app code first, infrastructure from code will always create least privileged and minimum viable infrastructure from the start, without requiring Caesar to know what permissions to set or what resources to provision in what order. And that's a game changer for bridging development and operations.
So IFC helps you break down your silos. So as a developer with IFC, I'm focused on my business requirements, using the best technology to solve the problems I have at hand, while being empowered to own the provisioning of my infrastructure dependencies without having the cognitive load of learning how to properly configure and operate those infrastructure resources. From an ops teams and platform team perspective, they can focus on implementing the standards and organizational requirements without having to chase down individual blueprints or templates for each new technology or to be a bottleneck for the development teams, while trusting that any security and operational guardrails are going to be included by default on the generated infrastructure as code. And it's context aware. With IFC, your generated infrastructure as code is always least privileged. It's aware of the context and only includes the resources that your application is actually using. And this is huge. As I mentioned, my background in security architecture, one of the things that I was in charge as part of my role was managing AWS IAM roles for the enterprise and the processes around it. How it worked was that a development team came to the cloud operations team with their architecture diagram at the beginning of their project, and the cloud ops team used that information to create least privileged IAM roles for that point in time. What ended up happening was that development teams didn't come back as their application evolved to pare down their privileges from what they originally envisioned, as they wanted to avoid the friction of dealing with another team and being in another meeting. So this caused a lot of applications to be unnecessarily overprivileged, which is a huge pain to fix once applications are in production.
Very true. So let's talk a little bit about what the infrastructure from code approaches are, right? Infrastructure from code is a whole movement, and there are a lot of different approaches that you can take. Some infrastructure from code tools have SDKs, which Caesar would plug into his app's code base, and then when he wanted to deploy, would generate the infrastructure from that code base. This requires some work on Caesar's part to ensure he's using the SDK correctly and that his code fits within the SDK's framework. There's also an IFC programming language. There's a couple of those out there. So Caesar could write his app from the start in a language built to generate infrastructure once the app is complete. This is a bit of a heavier lift for Caesar, who would need to learn a new language and then use it to write his app. And that may or may not be possible depending on the rules at our company, right? And how far along in the development process Caesar is when he learns about this option. And then there's static code analysis, and that takes existing code and analyzes it to determine what infrastructure is needed for that code to be deployed. Let's talk a little bit about how that fits in the pipeline.
So at Stackian, we believe that infrastructure from code should fit at the intersection of DevOps within your code artifacts and your CI/CD pipelines and workflow. So on the left, we start with the application, source code, and configuration files. This will be now the source of truth of your infrastructure architecture. Your operations and platform teams will configure your IFC tooling with the standards and best practices that they will like to enforce. And once a developer is ready with their code, they can trigger the IFC tool to do static code analysis on the source code and generate the corresponding infrastructure from code as Helm charts and Terraform, which can then flow back into your repo or your artifact store and flow into your existing CI/CD workflow. So with StackGen, your developers can ship code. It will generate the IC and move it to your existing CI/CD pipeline with a streamlined process that's aligned and context aware.
Very nice. And what happens with the deployment?
So here are the impacts that implementing IFC will have for you on your team. So first is streamline. Removing infrastructure provisioning requirements from developers helps speed up the new features and application deployments, and it keeps your business and customers happy, which is what we all want. Developers are more efficient. They're able to easily manage infrastructure and focus on your development. Your operations team is going to be more productive and focus on eliminating any toil instead of being a bottleneck for your dev teams. And you have standards built into the application deployment process. It's not scanned after the fact. Your cloud is secure by default without a security team involvement and slowing down the deployment.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we created generative infrastructure from code. Right? Using StackGen and a simple command, infrastructure as code is auto-generated based on the application code with no code changes required. And it's right-sized with least privilege access controls. But how does that happen, right? We've kind of talked about it. We've talked about where it fits in the workflow, but like how exactly does StackGen make that happen? I'm going to take you through a quick tour of what we do before Caesar shows you how we do it. First, we analyze your code. We currently support Python and Java, with more languages coming soon. Based on our analysis, we understand your required infrastructure, cloud dependencies, and then infer things like API, service, configuration, and more. And then we visualize. We create a visualization of your deployment architecture. If needed, you can drag and drop resources to enhance that architecture. And by design, we offer built-in guardrails and notify you if a connection that you're dragging and dropping can't actually be made because that's not possible, or if you added a resource that's against a policy or best practice. No unsecured S3 buckets here, and no trying to create something in AWS that is physically impossible, as I have tried to do in Terraform several times. And then, once you have your architecture all set, we go ahead and generate your Terraform or Helm charts, or both. And those files already have all of your golden standards baked in. Least privilege access controls, AWS or Azure policies, any compliance policies like SOC 2, HIPAA, PCI, etc. It's all there for you. Okay, Caesar, how about instead of ChatGPT, which might not grasp the nuances of Terraform and kind of needs you to know what everything you need in order to deploy, and can maybe hallucinate a little bit, which might not be great. Why don't you try StackGen?
Okay, let's give it a shot. So here's my repository. It's called Hello Kitty. This is a simple Python Lambda serverless-based application. Let me try and create my app stack and onboard my repo into StackGen. I want to do this from the source code directly using IFC. So let me search for my organization, which is under my name, and the repo is Hello Kitty. So this is a single service repository. Only one component is the Hello Kitty app, and it's on the main path, and Python. For my compute environment, I'm going to select AWS Lambda, and I already see that Sneaky Lauren sneaked in all of her policies into my configuration here. She's implementing SIS, benchmarks, HIPAA, ISO, NIST, SOC 2, PCI, well-architected framework, and everything is included by default. Thanks, Lauren. Now I don't have to think about that stuff. So I'll proceed. I'll name this Hello Kitty. And I'll create my app stack. So under the hood, once I create my app stack, StackGen will clone the repository. It performs static code analysis to infer what are the infrastructure dependencies for your application, and then shows you an architectural diagram of the things it found and allows you to make any updates on things that are not directly your source code. So for example, in the case of this Lambda function, I have a images bucket environment variable that my application expects. And I also have a bucket name that I have to pre-populate for my infrastructure itself. So I'll name this stack gen hello kitty user demo. And I'll put that on my environment variable as well. And I'll save my changes. The next step here is I need to do a few configuration changes here for my Lambda function to make sure that it takes into account how I do builds for my Lambda. So first thing here, for the code configuration, I have an S3 bucket called stackgen demo builds, where my code is pushed for on my CI/CD pipeline, and it's being pushed specifically to this path within the bucket. The next thing is that I want to have a function URL so that I can access my Lambda function. The cool thing is if I have to add any additional resources, I can always drag and drop. If I'm not specifically invoking any resources within the code base and stackgen didn't detect it, I can always drag and drop that. I can connect that to my Lambda function to give it access, and there we go. The other benefit of static code analysis, like Lauren mentioned, is that I get least privilege by default. For example, if I click this block between my Lambda function and the S3 bucket, my generated IAM policy grants me access to both object, list object, get object, and get object version. And the reason I'm getting those permissions is because the tool detected directly that those are the permissions, those are the API calls that my application is making. So it's least privileged by default. And if a developer like me is trying to be sneaky and bypass some of your requirements, let's try to say block public access on this S3 bucket false. If I save that, it'll trigger a policy violation, and while there are any policy violations in place, I'm not able to export my IAC or push it to my GitHub repository. I'll have to follow the remediation instructions here, fixing the violation before I move forward. So I'll fix that policy violation, and I'll delete DynamoDB since I'm not actually using that. So everything that you see on the canvas is backed by Terraform files that are automatically generated based on your infrastructure architecture from your application. If you want to see these files, you can browse through them through the UI. But the next step for me as a developer is to push these files into my GitHub repository. So I pre-configured my Hello Kitty repository here. It was my infra path. So I'm going to go and push to GitHub, where the system is going to create a pull request. So I'm going to go ahead and view my PR. All right. So now I can see that stackgen created this pull request. It has all of the necessary changes for my Terraform, for my infrastructure, codified as Terraform. And my repository already has a pipeline that uses GitHub Actions to do a Terraform plan and apply to provision the infrastructure resources. So let's give it a minute while the GitHub action loads. So now my GitHub action executed, it performed a Terraform plan, and it commented with the Terraform plan output into the pull request so we can see what resources are getting added here. So it's adding 12 resources for my infrastructure. So I'm going to go ahead and merge the pull request. I'll delete this branch, which is no longer needed. And if I go back to my actions, I'll see this infra apply, which is running with my merge code to do a Terraform apply on the infrastructure as code changes. Once this is applied, we'll see an output with the URL for my Lambda function. Let's give it a minute while Terraform executes Terraform apply. And finally, if we click here, my application is up and running. Hello Kitty, my random kitten image generator. Perfect.
Amazing. And then we have, our kitten marketing push all out the door without any maintenance interrupted. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Before we get into any questions, definitely try us out at stackgen.com or go check out our white paper. If you have questions or comments that you didn't get to, that we didn't get to, couldn't think of until the last minute, send them to us at info@stackgen.com. We love hearing from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm Bonnie Schneider, Sustainability Contributor to the Techstrong Group. I'm excited to introduce you to a groundbreaking new initiative from Techstrong Research, the Sustainability Pulse Meter. The Pulse Meter offers valuable insights into how environmental responsibility factors into tech purchasing decisions for key players in the industry. Position your company as a leader in the industry and differentiate from your competitors with the Sustainability Pulse Meter, offered exclusively from Techstrong Research.
Hi, everybody. This is Mitch Ashley. I'm so glad that you took the time to stop by and hear about some special research that we've been doing as part of Techstrong Research, now part of the larger Futurum Group, as Techstrong gets acquired. This was a look at DevOps and where we are on this journey. We've been doing this for a while. Some of us may be new, but some of us have been doing this for 10 plus years, maybe even quite a bit longer than that as part of DevOps. So we took some independent research time and examined, talked to our audiences across DevOps.com and all of our mailing lists, et cetera, and collected data from people and asking them kind of what are they doing with DevOps? Is it making an impact, and where do we think we're going next? So I'm going to be using some slides. I don't usually talk to slides, but when you're presenting data, it makes it a lot easier for you to follow along and consume and things like that. So be sure to ask any questions that you have in the chat. And if we don't get to those during the talk, I'll be happy to follow up with you. You can also follow me on LinkedIn and contact me there and let me know if you have any questions. So if you don't know me, I'm Mitch Ashley. I'm Chief Technology Advisor with the Futurum Group. I guess about the fourth largest analyst organization focusing on DevOps and cloud and cybersecurity, AI, et cetera. I'm also the founder of Techstrong Research, part of the Techstrong Group, where we did this research and serve as the CTO for the company. As I mentioned, my specialty areas, my background is both as a product creator, probably about 2/3 my career, and about a third practitioner, living the dream, if you will. So running IT, running software projects that weren't for products, et cetera. And I've also done 3 DevOps implementations, starting back, I think as early as around 2013 or 14. And at 3 different companies. So it's been quite a journey. So I'm able to share some of my experiences with that too. So as I mentioned, we talked to a wide group of people. So let's look at where we are on this DevOps journey. Where are we in the adoption, the maturity of DevOps? Now, if you look at the chart on the right, starting in 2014, you kind of see this nice, steady, gradual at first, but steady growth. It's not a hockey stick. It's not a kind of flat, plateau that's flattened off and decreasing. It's a nice steady growth of DevOps per year. And this is where we asked respondents, what year did you start practicing DevOps? So you can see we still have very significant growth happening year to year in the around 10% range. It's maybe dropped a percentage or 2 in the last 2 years, but we're still in that same area. And we also ask people, where are you on the maturity curve? Now, the the nomenclature that we used were things like getting started, right? I'm just starting to use piloting, DevOps, et cetera. I'm operationalizing it, meaning we're applying our learnings, we're getting our feet under us, we're starting to apply this to more than one, possibly multiple projects within the same group or organization. Standardizing is we're pushing this across, our company, right? Maybe not everybody is using it, but we've got it well enough that we think we can start doing this on a scalable basis. And the fourth category is mastering. We really have high competency in DevOps and confidence. Probably started a little bit earlier on that DevOps curve or invested significantly in making that happen. Now you can see a nice kind of bell curve. Most people are in that standardizing, about a third in that standardizing phase. Only 4% said they haven't started, 5% we don't plan to do DevOps. So we're talking to a majority of people that responded to this survey who are practicing DevOps on a day-to-day basis, certainly at least on their project, if not the largest group is doing it on multiple projects. So what aspects, kind of looking at the software development lifecycle, DevOps can happen in many places, right? We typically start in CI/CD as the entry point, very common for people to do that. And you can see that in the build, 79% folks saying that's where they started. And 70% for the CI/CD portions of that. So not unexpected, but you can see that's the most significant, followed by test and development and releasing software and kind of bringing up the ends of the process, the life cycle at the beginning, and planning and operating and monitoring. Not unexpected. So if you were kind of in this analysis, or you saw yourself in this data, you might see something that looks very familiar. We look at what percentage of your products are applying DevOps. We see 19% that said all of our stuff's on DevOps. 75% of our projects on DevOps, that was a third. 50%, 21%. So if you kind of roll this up and say, well, actually, if you look at 50% and above, you're looking at well over 60, close to 70+% of folks are at least applying DevOps on half, if not more, of their projects. So it's definitely being used, and much smaller on the curve for people that are 25% and below. Again, I said I'm presenting a lot of data and I'm talking a lot, so I have to take a drink of water here and there. So if we look at, we're doing DevOps, but are we investing in DevOps, right? We can say we're doing DevOps and practice some Agile, Scrum kind of things, some of the disciplines, but are we investing in DevOps in our organization? And there's a lot of different market statistics on the growth of the DevOps market and how much it'll grow by 2030 or whatever metrics that is used. This one happens to be from the DevOps market report showing growth really 2.5 times almost to 25.5 billion by 2028. There's others that have 2030. I think for us, when we looked at where are you investing, and you'll see these 4 colors or 5 colors used on some charts coming up, significant increase in the orange or the red spectrum, yellow being modest, blue being no change, kind of staying where we are. Then you can see very few are saying, decrease or no, significant decrease or not investing. So very much people are still on that front end of the investment curve. They're not in the early part. We're in that kind of standardizing into maturing phases, if you will. So development, we saw 41.5%, and testing 43.8% is the leading areas where people are investing. Again, if you're doing DevOps, that makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty common. But we also seen people investing in containers and orchestration and many other things. I'm going to show you some more details around that as well. So this is a bit of an eye chart. By the way, the report is available online. It'll give you a QR code that you can download. You can also go to techstrongresearch.com. It's free. Got to go through a little rich page. You'll get some emails. Yes, to attend some other webinar and event kind of things. Thank you for attending and following us. Just to spotlight some other areas. We looked at a lot of dimensions, and you can dig into the data that you find interesting. The things that I look for, where did we see kind of an uptick? And some areas there was quite a bit of uptick in investment. You could see, like, for example, in the middle of the page, automated test suites and tools. We're on the modest increase, or one of the highest areas, along with DevOps platforms. We're going to talk about platforms in a moment here. Also, AppSec, cold vulnerability scanning, API security, test case library, Results analysis, CI/CD, of course, automated deployment, observability being another. We've touched on a lot of areas. The main point is all areas are being invested in. We don't see any dropping off yet. So that tells me that we're investing across the life cycle of SDLC and how DevOps contributes to that. Now, I often use DevOps interchangeably with creating software. So sometimes when I say DevOps, I'm not talking about a tool. I'm not talking about one method or one thing like a CI/CD or a deployment. I'm talking about really how we do the things that DevOps contains, the philosophies around continuous improvement, small elements of work, automation, deploying code to production in smaller chunks, et cetera. Being able to really have multiple streams, workflows all happening at the same time. Whether it's a few or it's thousands, just depends on where you are in your organization. So let's talk about value delivered by DevOps. This, I think, is kind of the money shot, if you will, that, if you want to use in a presentation to your manager or sales presentation to a customer or something like that. Nearly half, 45.6% of software organizations say DevOps increases their velocity to deliver new capabilities into production. Now, why this is significant is I'm not as much a big believer in how many deploys per day or per hour, whatever is what matters. It does in some scenarios. That's important if we need to get an emergency patch out, right? We don't want it to be on just, pulling teeth to figure out how to get something in production on an emergency basis. We want to be able to ramp up our cycle and get something out quickly. But not everybody can deploy or more or less consume software multiple deploys a day. We're not all Netflix or Google or whoever. So I look at more of what increases our velocity. How can we get something to production more quickly on whatever basis? And then, of course, the chart to the top right, upper right, faster time to market. The colors here mean a little bit different, high, medium, low, and no change. So we kind of see the same thing again, right? High and medium get the biggest ratings. Oftentimes they're pretty close, if not the same, in that 40 to 45, 46% range. So the takeaway here to me, again, is, people are doing DevOps not because they think they're supposed to, or it's the fad or whatever, is that they are seeing value. And getting faster time to market is certainly one. Look at that, 38 and 42%, right? And high to medium. Increase the velocity, right? 46, 41%. The frequency of releases is also up. I think managing complexity, which is also an area we have a lot more work to do. Not quite as rated as highly there, but maybe helping. We'll see. This does look at the frequency of deployment. Just kind of breaking down that a little bit more. In our respondents, we saw daily at 12%, weekly 34%, monthly 29%. So kind of a distribution curve between daily and quarterly, which I'm not surprised to see, right? Most of us don't deploy multiple releases into production per day. But the fact is, we are doing it more frequently. I can remember my first project coming out of college. We didn't release code for a year. Can you believe that? That would be heresy today. Yeah, you'd get fired if you're the project manager for that project today. How things have changed. So which of the following does your organization practice regularly? Kind of looking at different aspects or dimensions of DevOps. And we could have added 20 more things, right? There's so many elements of what does it mean to be doing DevOps. But this is in kind of rank order of responses. Continuous integration, continuous deployment. That's often our starting point, as I mentioned earlier. Automated testing, yep, makes total sense, because that way we're doing testing as we check in code, or maybe even testing within our IDEs as we're doing development. Code scanning, looking for vulnerabilities, very common practice. Infrastructure as code, 51%. That's the first one that jumps out at me is like, okay. Doesn't mean we're all doing Terraform. Maybe we're using a third-party tool to do some of that. We may be using some infrastructure provider, cloud provider tools to do that as well. That's interesting. And now we get into the distinction between continuous delivery and continuous deployment. Some people break those out, have very firm definitions. Many people don't have quite as much. So you probably folks clicked on both or selected both of those because this was a multi-select question. Observability, 47.5%. I think that goes to the complexity question also, right? The ops, of course. but being able to manage the code that we are deploying, especially if we're doing cloud native. DevSecOps as a practice, 47%. I'd love to dig into this more, and I have some beliefs and some data to back up some of those. And others are hypotheses about what's happening in DevSecOps, but that's for another time. Security testing, system SRE, platform engineering, 34%, testing and production, feature flags. Of all the things we listed, feature flags was at 18% at the bottom. Doesn't mean it's not important. It's just not as many people are doing that. All right, I feel like I'm at the response to the presidential State of the Union, drinking my water here. So thanks for hanging in there with me. Okay, so let's talk about platforms. Well, I've heard about platform engineering, the idea of doing a better job of creating the kind of platforms, standardizing those, using fewer configurations, et cetera. And that's, in some ways, we look at that as I don't know if it's a spin-off or an expansion into other areas. Some people say platform engineering killed DevOps. Definitely not, in my opinion. Clearly, the data doesn't show that. But it is a discipline that was much needed and I think has brought a lot of value. What's happened, though, is in the DevOps space is we are moving from individual tools that we as practitioners or you as practitioners get to integrate and try to build pipelines with, and then try to figure out what to do with the data across all of these different tools to leverage for what's our metrics, what's our productivity, where are we running into problems, where we apply AI to some of that data. And platforms are about a couple of things. One is having a shared data structure, an infrastructure, whether that's a platform or a database or a data lake or some combination data model of how data across different parts of the SDLC can be leveraged so I can look down the pipeline and see, okay, here's where we're hitting bumps in the road. I don't have to try to figure out the differences between 5 different tools. And another is being able to build workflows, seamless workflows across multiple steps that would have to cross boundaries of functional tools in the organization. So when we asked about that, what is your organization's most common approach to using DevOps solutions? Are you using things that are platforms, DevOps platforms, if you will? Primarily individual standalone DevOps tools, 25%, an equal combination of both platforms and individual tools, 40%. Primarily an integrated DevOps platform, 32%. So we see kind of a nice breakdown, again, a bit of a distribution curve, bell curve on that. Will you move to an integrated DevOps platform solution over the next 12 to 18 months? 16% yes, 29% said currently investigating, 37%. I'm not sure why that's not quite our 32% on the other side, but on the other question, but in the range. Say they're already on it. So you can see we've got almost half of the respondents, half the people considering either they're going or considering moving to some kind of a platform solution for DevOps. So that might point you in the direction of ideas, reducing integration, some of that complexity that we talked about before. Now, CI/CD being the middle of that oftentimes is a path to platforms. And we have a significant number of people that are reporting, we use 1, 2, 3, not uncommon to have that many. See a lot of drop off until we get to 10 plus. And then, of course, a good percentage, like, I don't know. I mean, no, we're not even tracking that. But some people are running a lot of platforms, variations of CI/CD solutions, I should say. And that could drive a lot of complexity. Sometimes you need to do that, for example, deploying in different environments, different technologies. I'm running Python here and Perl here and Go and Rust and whatever it might be that I'm trying to do these deployments across different production environments. So sometimes it's a necessity to do that. But are you considering replacing or upgrading one or more CI/CD solutions in the next 12 to 18 months? 32%, a third saying yes. No, not quite a third, 27%. Currently assessing needs is another 28%. So again, you've got 60% of the market who is retooling, continuing to evolve their infrastructure. And just because you aren't doing that now, it doesn't mean you might not do that down the road. But the good news from the vendor side of it, of course, they're happy to see that you're looking at making some changes. And if you're also looking to move a platform to a platform approach, that kind of informs maybe their product strategy as well, or certainly your questions if you're a practitioner to one of the technology providers. Something else that goes, DevOps is kind of a family of things, right? A lot of things happened with DevOps when we started introducing this kind of an approach. Yes, tools, et cetera. But we also leverage DevOps to be able to do cloud native, right? Could you imagine doing microservices on any significant scale without DevOps, right? Being able to do this incrementally and deploy it into test and production environments? Probably not. I can't. We had a really nice debate about that on a panel one time. But also observability coming along with it as in parallel with, if you want to say with DevOps, however you choose to look at that. Is your organization deploying cloud native applications using microservices? 56% said yes. And I've seen data to validate this. We have a white paper coming out, one that's sponsored by Docker, looking at, in companion with their kind of state of development report, Manager's Guide to Doing Development. Definitely recommend checking that out. I'll include it in the description for you. You can download that. But cloud native, microservices, depending on your definition of cloud native, definitely part of the picture here. Does your organization utilize observability tools? Now, here's an important point, is it isn't just in operations, right? It is operations, but it's also security, development. We see a lot of increase of people using observability and development for their own triage, work, investigations, all that kind of stuff. So customer experience, another great way. That's one of the things I was very excited about observability in the beginning, is being able to put some measurements in place to measure what's the response time to the end customer. Do we see abandon rates increase as we deploy code, whatever it might be, and ultimately driving it to business KPIs. Now, not as many people are on those last two areas, certainly in the testing, development, et cetera, operations and security for sure. But that looks to me like a growing trend where we have more and more people using observability in that way. So I mentioned platform engineering. I and just labeled it here, friend or foe. It's definitely friend. Maybe there's a few folks that feel strongly and don't like DevOps or whatever. Frankly, many, I don't know if it's many organizations who are doing platform engineering are also the DevOps people or doing the DevOps function. So why are you adopting platform engineering? Increased developer productivity. I really like that. Standardize on a set number of configurations, reduce cost, decrease complexity, improve security, better infrastructure management, deploy your applications at greater scale, provision dev test production environments faster. Developers will appreciate that, obviously. So there's a lot of important things. And one of the things I think platform engineering has been so successful at, like DevOps, is it's very adaptable to what the needs of your organization are. You may have it down with configurations and all of that, but you need better security in those configurations of those platforms you're deploying. Or maybe you've got so many things that you're doing, you just need to simplify and decrease some of the complexity. And I think that's a big reason why we see platform engineering being adopted so favorably. How would you characterize your organization's embrace of platform engineering? Pervasive adoption, we're in the 20-21% range, somewhat in places, 40%. Blue, experimenting, right, just below 30%, right around 28 or so. So we're in this adoption curve, but we made a lot of progress in platform engineering happening in parallel or with this part of DevOps, depending on how you choose to look at it. I look at it this way, because it's not just platform engineering. We have SecOps, we have DevSecOps, we have FinOps, we have GitOps, we have a whole number of even sustainability ops, and I've kind of come to call this XOps, right? I call it the long tail of DevOps, meaning it isn't DevOps. You're not doing necessarily software creation as part of that process, but you're taking the principles behind DevOps, and this is something the report describes, I think, really well, kind of breaking that down and into what its core elements are, and why DevOps isn't just it isn't just about creating software. It's about how to do a lot of different kinds of work. And it's not any surprise given how it's come out of total quality management, Deming, and Toyota manufacturing, and so many different disciplines that contributed to this. So just some stats that we collected, how many people were doing GitOps. You can see it in the kind of at the strong adoption in the low 20s, somewhat adopted a little bit in the low 30s. Same thing around FinOps. You see that in the high teens, strong adoptions, kind of high 20s, 20%-ish range. Also, does your organization have a sustainability effort related to DevOps? 59%. And I think this is really fantastic because a lot of us have sort of a causality or causation, whatever the right word is to say, there's things that we believe in that we need to improve about energy consumption or more efficient software or using only resources as we need them as opposed to over provisioning. A lot of things that we look at as like we could do this in a better way. The sustainability has helped bring some of those questions to light. So we might do things in operations or DevOps or delivery, SRE, any number of those areas. But it was interesting to me we asked all these different dimensions, and the lowest one, well, not counting none of the above, but the lowest one was 28%. That's pretty phenomenal. So it is, sustainability is a big part of why we're doing this. So please check that out too. Now, so the at the end of the day, how do we feel about DevOps and where we're headed? Well, how would you describe the future of DevOps? People ask me when I give this talk, so has DevOps run its course? Or what's the next thing going to replace it? Have we kind of worn out its welcome? We need to do something else, or do we need to remarket it or brand it? It may be that way in some organizations, but when you look at the data and you saw how strongly the adoption is still happening, when we ask this question, just generally, what's your sense? What's your feeling about the future of DevOps? 50% said very positive. 38% said positive. So on the positive end of the scale, you got 88% of people saying, I think there's a bright future for DevOps, either bright or good, depending on how you want to define very positive and positive. Neutral, 10%, kind of meh, that kind of response. And on the negative or very negative, 1.5%. Man, I don't think I've ever worked on anything that had that kind of positive response. So not that I'm claiming any credit, but it's good to see that we're having such positive results and positive outlook on the future for DevOps. So you can download the report here. Mentioned you can go to techstrongresearch.com. You can click on the QR code. I promise there's no malware in this QR code. Created it myself, so I know where it goes. It's a free report. It's about 32 pages, I believe. But it's very visual, like you've seen in the data here, and with some really nice narrative. I also want to point, we have a couple of new releases. I mentioned the Docker Leadership Guide to Application Development in the age of cloud native, containers and microservices. There's QR code on the bottom right for that. That's available today. You can go to that page and download it. Also, we did some analysis around AI's role in DevOps. We did this in the April-May timeframe and released it in July. Really interesting findings. It is making an impact, trying to get past the hype of AI and say, what are we really doing? And I call it DevOps, but software creation. We're using it in test, development, operations, security, things like that. Those are all free. Help yourself to that. I'd love to have you take advantage of that. For me, you probably see me on LinkedIn or on Techstrong TV or any number of those places. And if you haven't checked on Techstrong Gang, it's a show that we do 5 days a week, new content every day. There's a group of us, 3 to 5 people from different disciplines, depending on what the topic of the day is, from infrastructure to legislation that might impact AI to new DevOps things that are happening, cloud, security, whatever it might be. Definitely check it out. It starts at 9:30 a.m. On the Eastern time zone, and it's played throughout the day. You can go to Techstrong TV and watch that, as well as the content lineup, the same kind of interviews we've been doing for a number of years now. You can also check out my new research as part of Futurum. Go to futurum.com/analyst/Mitch-Ashley. I mentioned Techstrong Research. Resources that are there. Also have a blog or a post corner, if you will, on DevOps.com. You can check me out there. So I'll be at KubeCon. If you're coming to Salt Lake City, please stop by. I'll be coming to OpenText World and also to reInvent. And who knows where else. We're almost at the end of the year, but there'll be a whole bunch of stuff happening coming up as part of the new year that I'm sure I'll be able to catch you at. So thank you for watching. Appreciate you being part of this talk with us. I wish you the best on your DevOps journey. Please reach out. Let me know if there is anything you find interesting or things you don't find helpful, or maybe questions we haven't answered yet that we can help you with. Just M. Ashley at futurumgroup.com. Thank you. Have a great rest of the conference. We'll talk to you soon.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.